Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, what's going on? Sal here, back again. This video is going to be a little bit different now. So I'm shooting this before Week 17 even kicks off, but it's going to be coming out the week after, before the first week of playoffs. I'm going to be doing a road trip, so right now I'm probably doing a road trip back from Texas, 5-day road trip. So yeah, it's going to be fun, but it'll be limited. So I want to make sure I can get you guys some content out there. We got a new guy in the Facebook group, Dustin Gilstrap. Dustin Gilstrap, if you're watching this, welcome to the Facebook group. We'll get you in there in a second. If you want to be like Dustin and get in the Facebook group, just down below, you can get into the Facebook group. It's an exclusive Facebook group. That was a good little plug there, Dustin. But yeah, we're just talking strategy, talking just slates, NBA, NFL, whatever it's going to be, MLB when that comes out. Learning from each other, just a community to be more interactive since YouTube isn't as interactive as I'd like it to be as of right now until we get live streaming next year or soon to come. But yeah, just want to give you guys some tips. So I don't know if it's going to be 5 tips. I don't know what I'll name this, but just tips coming into the fantasy playoffs, how to approach these slates, right? So they're different. They're not 15-game slates like this one, or we're used to 12, 13, 11-game slates when there's buys and things like that. These are going to be, 4-game slates, 2-game slates as it gets deeper, all the way up to the Super Bowl being a showdown slate. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind here. Whatever sites you're playing on, obviously they're going to be different. There's going to be a lot more action going into these because public people, their regular seasons just ended in their standard leagues, the people that only play standard league, and now they're like itching to play some Draftkings because they have that itch, right? They just got finished fantasy football. They don't want it to be done. Oh yeah, I'll throw some money into a Draftkings. So there's going to be higher pools, I would imagine. There's going to be higher payouts. So that's the first thing to look at. Whether you're on Draftkings, FanDuel, Draft, Fantasy Draft, any of these sites, make sure you're looking at the payout structures, right? You want to pick the tournaments that are the most optimal for you. Most tournaments obviously are paying out between 18 and 20%, and that's just normal to the top guys. A majority of the money going to the top guys. But make sure you're checking out those payout structures. They're always susceptible to change. See if you can find smaller field tournaments. So what I mean by this is if you can find 100-person tournaments, even if the total prize is only like $1,000, jump into those because obviously your chances of winning with 100 people are way more. Those I noticed last year popped up more around the playoff time. So look out for those. But yeah, just check in terms of game theory and just strategizing before you actually get into making a lineup, how you can set yourself up optimally when there's a lot more public money coming in like we saw on Thanksgiving, lots more public money. And you could also bring that into just thinking about players to fade and things like that, who you think the public would like more because it's going to be heavy public weeks in the playoffs. Like we mentioned, standard leagues are ending and then just a lot more action going on in the playoffs. They draw a lot more attention, obviously. And it's also better teams are playing then. So more viewership, things like that. So that would be my first tip for you guys. The second tip then is these are smaller game slates. And right now, I haven't mentioned it, but this is DFS Assist. This is my blog, right? I made a website. Thought it would be a lot harder. I had a teacher tell me that they cost $30,000 to make a website. I bought a $100 domain and just created this on Wix. Like, it's not that hard. But yeah, it's just basically a blog, right? Like all this keeps right now is some blog posts that I'm talking about. By the time you're seeing this, this will probably be updated because this is probably going to drop maybe 5 days from now. Definitely going to do that. You have the Facebook group. So it's pretty simple right now, right? It's just blog posts. It's just YouTube. It looks a little bit more professional if I want to put myself in front of companies to write for them, things like that. But I encourage you to go and check it out there. I put a lot of work into this, and it's a lot of fun. All my videos from YouTube are housed in here as well, in case somebody discovered the blog without knowing about the YouTube, all that. So go ahead, check it out. It's Daily Fantasy Assist. That's what our Facebook group is called. Just a way to kind of just build a community, right? So you can check that out for sure, guys. But yeah, focusing on these smaller game slates. So 4 and 2-game slates I've talked about in the past. I've talked about it in blogs. I've talked about it in this article right here. You can download this completely free below. It's like 9 pages, and it's titled Finding Your Edge, 10 Contrarian Tips, but really it's just a way to set yourself apart to have a better chance of winning. You can download it right below. I put a lot of work into this, as you can see here, just graphs, things like that, finding it, sourcing from Fantasy Labs. But we talk about smaller game slates in there and the strategies on those. If you read that, you're going to know a little bit about this, but understanding that on smaller game slates, everybody spends, or on slates in general, people like to spend their money. We've talked about if you leave $500 on the table, you're going to be normally on most weeks in the bottom 5% of people who do that, setting yourself apart if you can build an optimal lineup. On smaller game slates, people like to pay up just as much, right? They want to get the best players because there's limited players on that slate. But when they're paying up and they're getting the best players, and they very well might be the best players don't always perform optimally. I mean, we've seen already this year players bust, right? And if they're not busting, they're really expensive and they're not getting you there with 30-point games at their high price range. On these smaller game slates, obviously you want the best players. I'm not saying fade the best players. That's my biggest thing. Play good players. Play the best players when you can and when it's optimal. So play the good players, get those expensive guys. But when you're battling down below and you have say you have $5,300 left for a flex spot, and you have a couple of wide receivers, a couple of running backs that are optimal, but they're all basically in that same range of, yeah, they need to get a touchdown to do good, or yeah, all these running backs are going to get maybe 12 touches, 15 touches, and the wide receivers maybe 6 targets. It's pretty much Yahtzee at that time, right? And some of them are going to be in better situations, but they're priced less, and that's where you have to take advantage of it. If you have a guy who's $4,700, but you have $5,300 left, buy him if you think he's the best bet, because you're leaving money on the table, and nobody else is going to want to go down there when there's other guys more expensive. Everybody thinks that just because a guy's more expensive means he's the best play. That's not true, and especially on these small game slates, you need to find ways to get your edge since there's less players. Leaving money on the table and still building an optimal lineup, I think, personally, is the best way to do that without taking on more risk. I think other people are actually taking on more risk, I would argue, by paying up because they think the price indicates how good the player is. Most of the time, at the higher ranges, it definitely does, but we've seen all year that these sites are pricing players wrong, whether it's because of injuries and things pop up or just because they get something wrong in the pricing, right? Or because of matchup, whatever it might be. We've seen Jacksonville in the past. You're playing Jacksonville or you're playing the Ravens this year. Some prices get suffocated because of that defensive matchup. You try and take ownership off of the guy, whatever it might be. So don't be afraid to leave money on the table. You need to find your edge on these smaller game slates way more than ever if you're going to be playing tournaments and potentially even in cash, right? Because there's so few plays that if you have that guy and he scores 15 and the guy has another guy who literally only scores maybe 12, those 3 points are so big on smaller game slates. Find your edge that way. I'd encourage you guys to look into how you're building your lineups. Are you leaving money on the table, or are you moving up from a lower owned guy who's probably a better play just because you think the higher owned guy is what you're supposed to be doing, spending all your money? Little psychology part of the game. That would be my tip there. The next part is like factoring in Vegas. We talk about that in here as well. Factoring Vegas, that's also getting sent out in some of the email listing, which if you sign up for that, you'll get all these tips and tools and discounts, whatever you want. Guys, I'm just getting whatever I can get for you. And factoring in Vegas, this is something that most of us do, right? Even like guys who are somewhat sharp, they know to use Vegas. The point totals indicate which games are going to have the highest point totals and which games you should target in fantasy. And it's getting to the point where now that's like pretty much mainstream, and it's actually optimal, probably, I'd argue, to fade those games in a decent amount of lineups unless it's an obvious smash spot. Like we saw on Thanksgiving night, Saints-Falcons, so much heavy ownership, you didn't need any of the players in that game because it was a terrible game, right? Or you didn't need like the Alvin Kamars and the Michael Thomases and the guys that were highly owned because it was a terrible game. And that can happen any single week. You have to take things into account. So what I'm going to say is look at the Vegas lines and all that things, but look at the games that are played outdoors, right? These games are happening in December, January, basically all January for the playoffs. Look at the games that are going to be playing outdoors and look at the games that are going to be playing in domes. Now, it's pretty simple, right? And that's going to be built into the total. Like if it's Dallas and New England or New Orleans, but we've seen that it's already been low. Any games that are played indoors, especially at this time of the year, it's a huge advantage, right? I don't even care who the defenses are. And like I said, Dallas and New Orleans, we saw that game was pretty low scoring. But again, I still think it's a huge advantage because I'd much rather have players in that game, even if we've seen Dallas shut down New Orleans once. Also, that's probably going to lead people to not playing a lot of players in that game or not play a lot of New Orleans guys. I say I don't think they're going to do it twice. Sean Payton knows how to make adjustments. Something like that. That's another way to get an edge. Just doing what other people won't. But like, do you really want to play people that are going to go into Chicago when it's negative degrees, especially if it's somebody like, I don't know, Jared Goff, which there's a possibility. Again, I don't know how Week 17 is going to shape up, but that could happen if some crazy things happen and the Bears get a bye. Do you really want to be the team doing that? Do you really want to be playing a team that's somehow going into Seattle? I know Seattle's the 5 seed, but again, if a 6 seed does it somehow. Things like that. Do you really want to be playing guys going into those cold environments? We've seen it before. We've seen it really anytime on a Monday night or Sunday night football game later in the year. If the offenses aren't both dynamite, like a Chiefs and Rams or something, it's pretty tough for players just to get accommodated to that colder weather. We saw it when the Rams did go to Chicago, and it's not just playing in the game, right? It's it's flying to Chicago, getting off the airplane and being brutally cold. You're literally used to LA not being below, 70 degrees, being brutally cold, going to the hotel being brutally cold, leaving the hotel to get to the bus to the stadium, warm-ups, all that. It's not just that 3 hours that you're cold. You're cold for the whole 3-day, 4-day stay, practice, all that. Jared Goff's not used to that, right? He hasn't been used to that in his whole career. We obviously saw that. Take advantage of those situations. That's probably going to be mainstream maybe when the time comes, but don't overthink it, right? Don't overthink it. If a team is in a bad game environment situation, whether it's because of defense or other things, you also want to be taking into account weather, like weather and the field and all those types of things. I'd much rather play the Bears and Rams when they're in a dome, if that's not going to happen, obviously, but if they're in a dome, than if they're outside of Chicago. Like, That sounds very obvious, but just don't overthink those things. Whew. So I guess this is what, like the fourth tip now? So this one I would say, there's two parts to this. So the first part I want to say, like, stick to what got you here, but that's not something you should be doing, right? What I mean by stick to what got you here is stick to how the 2018 season has played out. Look at that and see what trends will continue into the postseason, but also be able to decipher it and see which ones won't continue. So a big one that I would say is pass-catching running backs, right? 2018 has been all about pass-catching running backs. Draftkings, FanDuel, none of these sites, especially Draftkings, since it's PPR and you get the bonus. We've seen McCaffrey go over 100 twice. That's an extra 6 points. That's crazy. Or go over 100 receiving and rushing. Look for these types of trends and see if they can continue. So the pass-catching running back, can that continue into the postseason? Obviously, yes, it can continue. Nothing's going to just stop players or quarterbacks from passing to the ball. But what I mean by that is, are these players still in the running? Christian McCaffrey's not. Saquon Barkley's not. Those are the two biggest guys we've been talking about for pretty much the whole year in terms of how many targets they're getting. Obviously, Alvin Kamara's there, but he's a totally different player in that Saints offense now that and actually, he wasn't a totally different player. They were throwing a lot still with Ingram out there. It's just the fact that he's coming off the field more. He's not playing 85% of the snaps. He's playing 45% of the snaps, 50% of the snaps now. So a viable pass-catching back who's going to play a lot of the snaps, I mean, who do we have, right? We have Todd Gurley, of course. But on the other side, who do we have on the Chiefs? The Patriots have a ton of different guys out there. Don't know who's going to be making it out there right now. But whether it's the Titans or the Colts, I don't really trust any of those guys to get in. Obviously, the Ravens don't have anybody. Like, are there really pass-catching running backs you can rely on? Tariq Cohen's out there, but he's pretty hit or miss. He could be a great tournament play. And what I mean by this is, are you going to throw those guys in your flex? You're going to play 3 running backs because they catch the ball. I would say this year that it's looking more optimal to try and go over to wide receiver there, because a lot of people are going to say, hey, this trend of playing running back all year is the trend to go to. But the reason that was a trend to go to is because you had 30 players to choose from and there was 10 good ones, right? Now you're going to have, starting running back wise, 12 viable players to choose from, and there's going to be 3 good ones. And maybe you can't fit them all in because of salary, or maybe there's not even 3 good ones, because really right now all I'm thinking in my head is potentially Kamara and Todd Gurley. I'm probably missing somebody just right now on the top of my head, but you see what I'm going with here. So be able to differentiate yourself, putting a wide receiver in the flex this year. We've looked at it here. We can go to it. This again, you can check this out. Wide receiver in the flex was this year, as opposed to week 15, only 19.4% of people are using a wide receiver in their flex position. So yeah, obviously you're separating yourself. That's going to change with playoffs because they're smaller slates, but I still think 50% plus of the field is going to be using 3 running backs, or around 50% plus. Obviously, tight ends is another way to completely differentiate yourself. It's just a matter of, is there good tight ends in the postseason? Yes, Gronk is still decent, not terrible. He's definitely a guy who can always go off. We know that. He has a ceiling still. Yes, you have Kelsey. So there's definitely some of these options out there. So that's just, I guess, a 4th tip we're at now. So let me look at this last tip quick. So actually, I'm going to try and break it into a few tips. One personally for your bankroll, and then just another one. So for the bankroll one, what I want to just talk about here is, yes, it's the playoffs. Yes, it's towards the end of the NFL season, especially if you're like me and primarily likes to play NFL. Again, I'm going to be getting into NBA and MLB. But something that's definitely interesting is the psychology part of, oh, it's the end of the year, I got to go all in. Don't do that, right? Whether you've made money this year, don't lose all your money. Whether you've lost money, don't lose more of your money, right? Play the same amount that you've been doing. Use the same strategy. I'm going to be coming out with bankroll tips, how much percentage you should be using, optimal depending on your situation, depending on how much money you have on the next few weeks once the NFL ends, to keep those content videos for the NFL coming out. But don't just lose your head, right? Don't start betting a ton of money. I've been susceptible to it. I sports bet a little bit here and there, but last year I lost my head in the playoffs because I thought these are my last couple of chances of getting money. Obviously, nobody wins at sports betting. I mean, very rarely do you do long term. Very rarely people do. Same thing with DFS, and it's because of emotions and things like that. Emotional betting is probably the main reason you can't keep yourself in check. Don't just go out this weekend and you've won $500 this season in DFS. Like, it's a lot nicer to walk away with $500 at the end of this weekend, or maybe you lose a little bit in $450, whatever it is, at the end of this weekend, than it is to lose it all or be $200 down because you just wanted to get it all in one week and you went away from everything that you practiced perfectly the whole season. So just make sure you're not doing that. That's just another tip for sure. And then the last thing I would just say is focus on opportunities in the postseason. Focus on new guys stepping into roles. This is something that's obvious, but don't overthink it, right? You got to this point, a lot of things are similar. Some things that we've discussed are going to be different. Look for the opportunities. Look for the guys who are getting those 6 to 8 targets. And if they're a little cheaper and they leave a little money on the table, even better if it's still an optimal build or the optimal build, because not a lot of people do it like we discussed. Look for those guys who are going to get all the touches in the backfield. Preferably, they're going to catch the ball as well. But just stick to the basics here. It's the postseason. It's a fun time. It's a good time to make more money. We're going to have a lot of showdown slates. You can check out, again, download that article below. I talk about the showdown slate, the strategy that I use behind it, that I've been using this year that's made me this close. I'm not going to say, oh, I won $600,000 or $60,000. If I did, that'd be great. But this close twice, I'm between 1 and 2 points twice of a 5-figure payout. And obviously a lot of people are because it's so small. The one time I was actually making $13,000 with like 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, ended up losing by like 1.1 and ended up making like $300. The payouts are just insanely different. It's literally one catch since it's PPR format DraftKings. So you can check out that strategy, just ways to differentiate yourself. That's all in that download below. But yeah, these are just tips. I wanted to make this video, get you guys something out there. I'm going to try and do a first look or a breakdown, but again, I'm going to be driving. It's all up to the girlfriend if she'll let me do it. Sure, she will. It's just a matter of if I actually want to take the time to do it and have the proper equipment and everything there on the travel. So appreciate it, guys. Good luck in week 17. Well, it's already week 17 is over, so I hope you guys cash out in week 17. Always hoping for somebody to cash out big and send me that message that I helped them, because that's just what it's all about, right? Make sure you join the Facebook group. Make sure you download. And check out everything else in the description. Got a lot of deals for you guys. 30 days to draft dashboard for $1, only using my link. It's usually $40 a month, so we work something out with him. Some other things down there and a lot more coming. So yeah, appreciate it, guys. Best of luck. Playoffs are here. Let's have a good time. My name's Sal. Peace.